Welcome to this Pop Politics special. I'm Damien Lewarden. With me are Mitchell Ackhurst and Rebecca Hills-Judy. And
Ciao.
today we are here to talk about the situation around Boris Johnson and his lockdown parties and question whether we're about to see the end of Boris Johnson as Prime Minister of the UK. I'm not sure how closely you've been following this all, Rebecca.
I live in the country. I don't really have a lot of choice.
True. But so just a bit of an overview for anyone who's not familiar. My understanding is that there were a series of parties and events happening at number 10 Downing Street, which is the Prime Minister's residential address, during the lockdown period in the UK in 2020 and 2021. All of this has just come out in the past week or so. There have been plenty of calls for Boris Johnson to resign from his opposition, and I believe also from the First Minister of Scotland. I may be wrong on that.
Also, the leader of the Scottish Conservative Party, the Welsh Conservatives, and certain backbenchers in his own party.
Yeah.
In fact, there's some speculation that a lot of these leaks were actually leaked by members of his own party.
Ooh. Well, it kind of makes sense. And so there's been an investigative report that's already taken place, I believe, and that was passed on to the Met Police over the last weekend, which prompted the Met Police to launch an official investigation, but it's not yet been released to the public. Is that roughly right?
As far as I know from last night, it's 11 o'clock in the morning, and I am not a morning person, so...
But you've had your coffee.
As of last night, yeah, I've had my caffeine. We have a coffee clause. I am willing to get up and record these podcasts in the morning as long as I'm allowed to have my coffee first.
Anyway, so
Yeah.
With all of that in what's been happening, who knows what'll happen before this episode actually goes live, but with all that going on, is this the end of Boris Johnson? Is it the end of his prime ministership? Rebecca, what do you reckon?
I so hope so. Oh God. Any God, let this be the end of him. He is exactly the sort of bumbling, idiot, overeducated, posh git that has ruined this country in the past, is ruining it now, will probably ruin it again in the future, and the ones that we really need to get rid of. The French had the right idea. That's all I'm saying.
Very strong statements. Mitch, what do you reckon?
Well, I'm still here because I was on the previous episode, and I have to admit that I am not as familiar with British politics as I am with those of my own country.
Feel free to ask questions.
Most of what I know about Boris Johnson comes from John Oliver, and I have to admit that if this is a true example of life imitating art, then it will be the end. Because this is more or less the exact plot of a 25-year-old series, mini-series called Bootleg. And I don't know if Rebecca would remember this series, but it was essentially
That's
about...
That's fairly obscure. I'm impressed that you know that.
Well, I mean, in Australia we tend to get a lot of British television. And it was a mini-series that was about the banning of chocolate. That for the health of the nation, chocolate would no longer be allowed to be sold in Britain, and it had all of the various allusions to dystopian fiction that you can think of, as well as a disgusting brown block that you were allowed to buy from chemists that tasted like broccoli. And by the end of that series, it was this exact situation. It turned out that the politicians were dining on desserts just about every other day, because obviously there's a different rule for those in power than there is for everyone else. And I don't know how often this is going to have to happen, because it's been happening for thousands of years. But at least the people in the moment tend to suffer some repercussions from their actions. They won't suffer themselves, they will suffer the repercussions. They won't suffer themselves because they're already wealthy and can do whatever they like. But at least they'll be pushed out of positions where they can make things worse. For now.
I mean, for example, David Cameron, the guy who actually instituted Brexit, which has objectively made the country worse by every possible metric, now lives in the south of France in a villa.
Why am I not surprised?
No negative consequences whatsoever.
And everyone who's ever made money out of polluting the planet or discriminating against minorities or workplace harassment or any other thing that we can, one day ferret out the culprits and bring them to justice, will eventually find themselves on their own private island or beach in France.
Or Mars with Elon.
Part of the problem is that in the UK there is this mental image that everybody has of what a politician should be like. And it is usually a dude in a suit with a posh accent who's gone to one of the major universities and probably went to Eton. And the problem is that David Cameron and Boris Johnson fit that stereotype.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody goes, well, they look and sound like a politician, they look and sound like a prime minister, therefore we'll vote for them.
Although I'm not so sure about Boris Johnson with his whole...
Well, this is the kind of the eccentric toff thing, which is also kind of buried deep in British consciousness. So he plays up to that as well. And it's nearly all crap, because he's actually a malignant narcissist, and he has been fired from every single job he has ever had for lying. You can look that up, by the way, that's true. He's been fired from like 3 different jobs for lying his ass off.
So what you're saying is this is part of a consistent pattern?
Yep. And yeah, it took this to actually make his poll numbers drop. There was a really devastating image of the Queen sat on her own on a pew in Westminster Cathedral for her husband's funeral, next to a news clipping of this party that was happening either like on the same day or the day after.
I think it was the night before. I think they...
Yeah.
Yeah.
And everyone went, oh, because everyone loves the Queen. Even people who are generally anti-royal think the Queen's okay. Mostly.
Not sure if that's
fine.
the reaction down here.
I mean, all of the others can fuck off. Queen's alright. Liz is fine. Everybody else can fuck off.
Yeah. I think if we get back to the original question, I think for me, as much as I would like to see consequences, what do you need? 54 Tory MPs to actually write to whoever it is to force a no confidence motion that will allow them to possibly vote him out. I'd like to see it happen just because it would actually cement that idea that actions and choices have consequences. And a part of me gets the argument that, like, it's not something they should be worrying about right now when there are very valid concerns about Vladimir Putin invading Ukraine. So I get that side of the argument, but at the same time, like, I want to see people who are doing the wrong thing at the absolute highest echelons of power be punished for doing those things. I think that would be great because it's something that we've seen in the US. It's something that we've seen here in Australia. We've seen these people in positions of incredible power abusing that power and using it to cover things up and whatever else. And I just wish that there was some will to actually respond to that. As for whether it will happen, I have my doubts because I think it was back in 2020. I did an interview with John Ingold from Inkle, and we were talking about their upcoming game at the time, Pendragon. And one of the things that he commented was that in the world of politics, we've crossed a line with Brexit and with Donald Trump, in that it used to be that politicians would obfuscate, they would mislead, they would be sneaky, but they wouldn't lie outright. But that has changed now, and now we
Yeah,
have lies being thrown about as if it doesn't matter, as if words don't matter. And we're seeing that again. And it's the same sort of thing now. It's like, oh, I thought that was a work event in the middle of a
Mm.
lockdown where more than two people aren't supposed to be gathering. What fucking excuse is that for a work event? I don't care. It's like, it's a lie. So, I don't know. I don't think there will be that will. I hope there is, but I don't think so.
I don't think he's going to resign because he
Oh,
is
hell no.
the idea of him doing something wrong and facing consequences is completely alien to him.
Mm.
He has no concept of what that means. If he's going to go, it's going to have to be a vote of no confidence, which means enough of the conservative establishment are going to have to decide that he's no longer a useful idiot. Whether or not it has reached the point where that is the case, hard to say. I think it's reaching that point. If it's there already, hard to say. But then what we end up with afterwards is like, Charles Dickens villain, the most evil woman on the planet, useless git, another useless git. And it's like, these are all terrible choices.
yeah, it's tough. It's tough because we're in a situation now where like we're diagnosing similar problems at the very top of political leadership in all of our countries, and they all come from slightly different areas of thought. So I'm sure that the conservative thought in Britain shares some with conservative thought in Australia and in America, but I'm also sure that there's just as much that is completely alien to us in other countries, and we'd have to understand where it comes from. So it's like, this political wind of change going on in Australia or America that is completely absent in the UK, but for the fact that the reason we're all frustrated comes down to similar, highly placed, terrible human beings.
I think Billy Connolly had it right. The desire to become a politician should immediately bar you from ever becoming one.
Oh, I know the people I've been with who've organised the best of anything have been the ones who did it under duress. The ones who were there because they were really good at what they did, and so we asked them to do it even though they didn't want to.
There's a joke among convention organisers. It's like being competent within sight of a member of the committee, right? You are now in charge of this. What?
Yeah. I mean,
If only politics was a bit like that.
yeah. I think there's a bit of a problem with politics because, like, obviously, as Rebecca was saying, you've got a choice between a useless git, the most
An
evil woman
evil
on the
useless
world,
git.
an evil useless git. And I think that just points to like a systemic problem. It's like somehow the people who don't belong there are getting there. And so it's a problem that I think we need to have discussions about if we're going to get anywhere to solve it. We need to
I
highlight
know
it.
in the UK there's a pipeline that goes directly from Eton and the other private schools to politics, like pretty much directly.
It is a little similar in Australia. We've got
Yeah.
our squatocracy of certain older families who've been here long enough and amassed enough wealth that they go through certain schools.
So yeah, I think that's the thing that needs to change. That kind of posh git pipeline needs to stop.
Mm.
Yeah, but that's a big structural issue that really has very little to do with
Yes.
Boris Johnson or
Well,
whether
has
whether
something
whether
to
he
do with
stayed.
him. He comes from the PartyGate pipeline, but he is
He's a
not
part of it,
he is
but
not the originator of it.
no. But so yes or no? Will this be the end of Boris Johnson? Quick round, Rebecca.
Yes, I think it is, but it's going to take a little bit longer. But this is going to hang around him like a bad smell.
From what I know, I have to agree. I mean, it spells the end for him, but it's not the ending. We're gonna have to sit this through for a while yet.
Yeah. I
It's
think.
like the end of Lord of the Rings. There's a few epilogues.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. We're going to start seeing something, even if not necessarily he's going to be out next week.
Yep.
Yeah, so thank you for joining us for this conversation. We will see you on Monday for the full episode.
Bye bye.
Bye.